The mandate for systemic change. The Philadelphia homeless crisis of 2025 demands nothing less than a complete, radical overhaul of how the city allocates its resources and defines its morality. This requires the immediate closure of the addiction to jail pipeline, the immediate establishment of low-barrier medical stabilization centers near the most affected areas, and the massive, permanent reallocation of the correction budget towards the health court model and long-term supportive housing initiatives. The political goal must shift from managing public visibility to saving human lives and restoring public health. This requires confronting the political lobby that favors punitive policy and accepting that the immediate upfront cost of true medical intervention is a long-term investment that saves billions in social decay and emergency services. The final reckoning beyond the zombie city. The ultimate question facing Philadelphia in 2025 is one of conscience. Will the city continue to fund a policy that accelerates the destruction of its citizens, or will it finally choose to invest in compassion and medical recovery? The image of the zombie city is not a tragedy that just happened. It is a disaster actively sustained by political inaction. The time for convenient apathy is over. Share this documentary to expose the moral bankruptcy of the containment model. Subscribe to America's Uncomfortable Truth as we continue to hold the system accountable for the failures that actively destroy human life. The Apocalypse on Avenue K. We have traveled across America, documenting the slow decay of the Rust Belt, the extreme heat of Arizona, and the policy failures of Los Angeles. But all roads of addiction and urban crisis ultimately lead back to one brutal, unforgiving location: Kensington Avenue, Philadelphia. In 2025, the crisis here has escalated beyond fentanyl. It is now defined by the eerie, catatonic presence of its victims, earning Kensington the grim, unofficial title, the Zombie City. This is not a metaphor. This is the new, terrifying normal of America's most profound humanitarian disaster. A place where human beings are literally frozen in time, suffering an agonizing, visible decay on the streets. The chemical architect, Xylazine. The primary architect of this zombie city effect is Xylazine, known as Tranq. This powerful veterinary tranquilizer mixed with fentanyl induces a deep, prolonged sedation that leaves users in a catatonic stupor, often slumped over, frozen in place for hours. This isn't just addiction, it's a form of chemical immobilization that accelerates physical decay. Furthermore, Tranq causes the horrific signature flesh-eating wounds that turn an opioid crisis into a chronic infectious disease crisis. This visual evidence of human decomposition in public space is the ultimate indictment of a municipal policy that prioritizes containment and aesthetic management over immediate medical intervention. The question is no longer, can the city save these individuals? It is why the city allows them to remain in conditions that guarantee their physical destruction. The policy of denial containment as moral failure. Philadelphia's response to the fentanyl crisis has been rooted in the same failed philosophy we identified in Los Angeles: containment. The goal was to keep the crisis geographically concentrated to protect the rest of the city from the visual and economic disruption. This policy failed spectacularly on multiple fronts. Firstly, it created an environment of learned helplessness among social services, who were overwhelmed and desensitized. Secondly, it fueled the Kensington spillover, pushing the drug market and homelessness into surrounding working-class neighborhoods, a phenomenon we have previously documented. The containment policy was not a policy of hope. It was a cynical political contract to allow one neighborhood to be sacrificed to maintain the illusion of order elsewhere. Despite the overwhelming evidence that addiction is a medical disease, Philadelphia continues to rely heavily on the criminal justice system. As detailed in our report on the revolving door, police sweeps, while politically popular with some residents, serve only to maximize public expenditure while minimizing results. The high cost of repeated arrests, short jail stays, and emergency medical interventions costing taxpayers upwards of $40,000 per person annually is an economic absurdity. Furthermore, by removing individuals from the lethal drug supply temporarily, the system inadvertently guarantees a 129 times higher risk of fatal overdose upon release. The city has functionally institutionalized a cycle of costly, predictable suffering, choosing to fund the penalty rather than the cure, and ensuring the continued growth of the zombie city. The public health collapse. Life in the encampments of Kensington is no longer sustainable. It is a rapid descent into medical catastrophe. The unsheltered population, suffering from severe fentanyl and Tranq dependency, faces catastrophic consequences from the lack of basic hygiene and constant exposure. We are documenting the pervasive spread of infections like drug-resistant MRSA and the need for constant wound care to prevent the loss of limbs due to Tranq-induced necrosis. The public space has transformed into an unregulated biohazard zone, straining local hospital resources to the breaking point. The ethical dilemma is stark. The state is aware of the conditions that are actively destroying human tissue and leading to preventable death, yet it fails to deploy the immediate, low-barrier medical mobilization required to halt the decay. This is the definition of structural violence. The ethical abyss, the policy of waiting for death. The primary barrier to solving the zombie city crisis is the political resistance to low-barrier shelters facilities that allow the individual to enter and receive care without the impossible precondition of sobriety. Critics argue that these shelters enable addiction. However, the current high-barrier system ensures that the most severely ill individuals remain on the street, where they are guaranteed to continue using, guaranteed to infect wounds, and guaranteed to die. Choosing the high-barrier model is not a moral stand against drugs, it is a calculated political choice that prioritizes aesthetic cleanliness and adherence to obsolete rules over saving human life. The moral test for Philadelphia in 2025 is to abandon this policy of denial and embrace the concept that medical care, shelter, and compassion are necessary foundations before any meaningful recovery can begin.